Not all cars were created beautiful. Some were just bad ideas that were not thought out. Others were designs that were not well vetted. And few were just good ideas in theory and not in practice. From bizarre shapes to baffling designs, these American-made cars turned heads for all the wrong reasons. Buckle up for the top 10 ugliest cars to ever hit the road. The Prowler was supposed to be futuristic and cool, but instead it turned heads for all the wrong reasons. The Prowler's most obvious flaw was its design. With its huge front wheels, exposed rear tires, and long pointed nose, it looked like a weird mashup of a 1930s car and a 1990s sports car. The front end was all show, with a grille that looked like a face trying to smile. Meanwhile, the back was just a little too wide. Under the hood, the Prowler had a 3.5-liter V6 engine, which produced 214 horsepower. It wasn't exactly fast, but it was quick enough to catch attention. Inside, the car had a funky, minimalistic design with very little space. You wouldn't want to take a road trip in it, but it was perfect for cruising around town and getting a few confused looks. The Prowler might not have been practical, but it definitely became one of the most unforgettable and odd cars in history. The Studebaker Wagon Air was one of the first cars to have a sliding roof, but unfortunately it didn't have the cool factor it hoped for. Instead, it ended up looking like a wagon that forgot what it was supposed to be. The Wagon Air's design was strange from every angle. The front was boxy, with big, bulky bumpers and headlights that seemed to be staring off into space. The real problem, though, was the back. The car's rear window could slide back, which seemed like a great idea for fresh air, but it made the whole car look unbalanced. The sliding roof looked like something you'd find on a kid's toy truck, not a family car. Under the hood, the Wagon Air had a 3.2-liter six-cylinder engine, giving it just enough power to drive around, but not enough to make you excited. Inside, the seats were roomy, and it had a decent amount of cargo space, which made it practical, even if it looked like a giant mistake. The Wagon Air never became popular, and Studebaker ended up pulling it from production after just a few years. The Lincoln MKT was meant to replace the much-loved Lincoln Town Car. The MKT's design was confusing at best. Its massive grille resembled a whale's mouth, as if it was about to swallow smaller cars on the road. The sloping roofline gave it a stretched-out, droopy appearance, like a minivan trying to act cool but failing miserably. From the back, the narrow taillights made it look even more awkward, as if the designers gave up halfway through. Underneath all that weirdness, the MKT had some decent specs. It came with a 3.7-liter V6 engine producing 303 horsepower, or an optional 3.5-liter EcoBoost V6 with 365 horsepower. Inside, it was spacious and comfortable, with seating for up to 7 passengers. However, the luxury features couldn't distract from the fact that you were driving something that looked like a giant slug. The MKT wasn't much of a hit, and production ended in 2019. Our number 3 pick, ugliness is overshadowed by its danger to human lives. Stay glued to find out more. Don't forget to like and share, it really means a lot to us. The Buick Skylark started as a stylish, sporty car in the 1950s. By the 1990s, though, it had transformed into something ugly. The 1992 Skylark was unique, to say the least. Its front grille looked like a sad smile, and the headlights were awkwardly stretched out, almost like they were melting. The rear end wasn't much better, with taillights that seemed slapped on without a second thought. Under the hood, it wasn't all bad. The Skylark came with a standard 2.3-liter 4-cylinder engine producing 120 horsepower and an optional V6 with 160 horsepower. It wasn't fast, but it was enough to get you where you needed to go, assuming you didn't mind being seen in it. Inside, it had some decent features for the time, like power windows and air conditioning, but the plasticky materials and weird dashboard layout didn't win any style points. The Skylark was Buick's attempt to appeal to younger drivers, but its looks missed the mark. Here's an odd fact. The Dodge Rampage wasn't a truck pretending to be a car, it was a car pretending to be a truck. The Rampage didn't have the rugged charm of a real truck or the sleekness of a sporty car. Instead, it looked like someone glued a truck bed to the back of a hatchback. Its front end was plain and uninspired, while the back seemed like it didn't belong. The proportions were just off. The Rampage came with a 2.2-liter four-cylinder engine that produced 96 horsepower. Not exactly the power you'd expect from a truck. It could haul up to 1,145 pounds, which was decent for its size, but nobody was lining up to take it to a construction site. Inside, it had 2 seats and basic controls, nothing fancy. The Rampage was an experiment that didn't quite work. It was the kind of vehicle that makes you ask, why? The Chevrolet SSR was inspired by 1940s pickup trucks and muscle cars. Sounds cool in theory, right? The SSR was part truck, part convertible, and part sports car. But instead of blending these ideas smoothly, it mashed them together like a bad recipe. Its overly rounded body, chunky wheel arches, and massive front grille made it look like it was trying too hard to be different. And let's not forget the retractable hardtop roof, which was cool in concept, but not in practice. Under the hood, the SSR packed some serious power. A 5.3-liter V8 engine initially, later upgraded to a 6.0-liter V8 with 390 horsepower. It could hit 60 miles per hour in under 6 seconds, but who wanted to be seen driving it that fast? Inside, it was all about style over substance, with leather seats and flashy colors that didn't quite make up for its clumsy design. The PT Cruiser was once so popular that some dealerships had waiting lists for it. Hard to believe, right? The PT Cruiser tried to bring back the whole vibe of old-school hot rods, but it ended up looking like a car wearing a top hat. The exaggerated fenders, awkwardly high roofline, and oversized grille gave it a cartoonish vibe, like something out of a kid's drawing. It looked like it couldn't decide if it wanted to be a car, a van, or a bad Halloween costume. Performance-wise, the PT Cruiser wasn't anything special. It came with a 2.4-liter four-cylinder engine that delivered around 150 horsepower. Later models added a turbocharged version with a little more power, but the car still felt slow and clunky. Inside, it was practical, with foldable seats and decent cargo space, but no amount of practicality could save its bizarre look. The Ford Pinto was infamous for something more dangerous than its looks. It had a tendency to burst into flames in rear-end collisions. That's right, this car was both ugly and scary. Its stubby nose, awkwardly high rear, and boxy body made it look like it was always trying to catch up with itself. Ford aimed to create an affordable, compact car, but in doing so, something went wrong. Under the hood, the Pinto came with small engines, starting with a 1.6-liter four-cylinder that produced just 75 horsepower. It wasn't fast, but it did get decent gas mileage, which mattered during the 1970s gas crisis. Inside, the Pinto was bare bones, just enough seats, buttons, and knobs to remind you it was, in fact, a car. What really doomed the Pinto wasn't its looks, but its reputation. After reports of its gas tank exploding during crashes, it became a rolling punchline. The AMC Pacer was once called the car of the future. Turns out the future they were imagining looked more like a goldfish bowl on wheels. The Pacer's most noticeable feature? Its windows. There were so many of them, it felt like driving a mobile greenhouse. The designers wanted it to feel spacious, but the bubble-like design made it look squished. It was also oddly wide, earning it the nickname the Flying Fishbowl. Under the hood, the Pacer started with a 3.8-liter inline-six engine, which wasn't terrible for the time, but it wasn't a speed demon either. AMC even offered a V8 option later, but by then, people were too distracted by its awkward shape to care. The Pacer's quirky look wasn't enough to save it. While some appreciated its attempt to be unique, most buyers found it more weird than wonderful. The Aztec was Pontiac's attempt to create a crossover that mixed the comfort of a family car with the ruggedness of an SUV. Unfortunately, it looked like someone glued random car parts together. Its front end had split headlights that made it seem permanently confused, while the bulky rear gave it the vibe of a car wearing a backpack. Under the hood, the Aztec had a 3.4-liter V6 engine, which wasn't terrible, but its performance didn't exactly make up for the design disaster. Inside, it was practical with a spacious cabin and a camping tent option. Yup, you could literally turn the back into a tent for weekend trips. Cool, right? Well, not cool enough to make up for its weird looks. Despite its flaws, the Aztec was ahead of its time with features like a heads-up display and a built-in cooler. That's it, guys. I hope you found this video as interesting as we did. Which of these cars is the ugliest to you? Comment and subscribe to stay tuned for more interesting content.